welcome to episode 3 of the BigCeaz Show. And boy, do we have an awesome guest today. None other than 2023's Georgia Sports Broadcaster of the Year and the voice of the Atlanta Braves, Brandon Gaudin. How's it going, Brandon?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, man. It's definitely a busy time of year, right? March Madness coming around, spring training. Um, I think this is one of the best times of years.
Yeah, I love it. I grew up in Indiana, and I grew up first and foremost loving the Braves, watching them on TBS every night. But when you grow up in Indiana, you also grow up with a basketball in your hands. And so the crossover time for me of baseball's getting started, NCAA tournaments coming up, this is to me about as good as it gets for the sports time of year. And so I'm bouncing back and forth right now. We've done a few spring training games already. I'm still doing some college hoops. I got a couple games this weekend, but wouldn't have it any other way. I feel blessed to be able to call both sports and love doing both.
Awesome. So let's kind of tell us a little bit about your early childhood and what it was like living in Indiana.
So I grew up in the southern part of the state, city called Evansville, which is a decent sized city. It's about a couple 100,000 people. And I grew up in a sports family. My dad played sports growing up at a small college in New York. He was actually our high school soccer coach. And so and I had two older brothers, and my sister was the oldest. She was in cheerleading. And then my two brothers above me were really good athletes and played sports. And so I had no choice but to be involved in sports, but that's what I wanted. And, I started to gravitate really towards the Braves and loving baseball because of those TBS days.
We
I
kind of
was,
see
oh,
a
yeah.
picture of you.
Yeah.
How old
Yeah.
were you here?
So that was 13, I believe, when I got that. That was right after I think they won the 95 World Series that my parents
Okay,
got me that. So a few years
nice.
before that, so a few years before that is when I really started to like the Braves and watch them every night on TBS. And that World Series they won in 95 was kind of the pinnacle, right? But
Right.
91 was the year that they went from worst to first and made it to the World Series. And we were actually lucky enough to go down and watch Game 5 at Old Fulton County
No
Stadium when the
way.
Braves beat the Twins. And that
Okay.
walking into the stadium that night, that was really what got me hook, line, and sinker into Braves baseball. And sees from that day forward, I was locked in on the Atlanta Braves.
You were locked in. That's so awesome. Um, no, same here. My dad actually grew up a big Braves fan. Like you and everybody else that are Braves fans that I know that are my age, and watching TBS, and especially with my condition where I'm very susceptible to broken bones. So when I would be in bed and they would be my like therapy,
Mhm.
because you can't really go out and do anything when you're sitting in bed all day or anything like that. So they were a big part of my life too, growing up, and just watching Chipper Jones, um, Justice, the Bear, and who was it? Deion Sanders, all
Yep.
these players coming up, Fred McGriff, all those.
So,
Um,
sees how? So I'm 40. How old are you?
I'll be 39 this May, so
Okay.
I'm right there with you.
So it was the same time, and I always tell people because the Braves were on in the '80s, but you'll
Right?
agree with this. You'll agree with me on this. So, but when they really started getting good in '91, that's when TV sets all across the country started to tune into them. And you know this as well as
Exactly.
I do. Like now, kids kind of don't understand because they have access to everything on TV. But back
Everything,
then,
even like
you couldn't watch games. So the Braves or the Cubs on WGN. If you wanted to watch baseball throughout the summer, those were your only options for
those were the
sports
only
entertainment.
teams.
Yeah.
Exactly. And,
So
and not even the Yankees were really on. It was just
no.
either the Braves or the Cubs.
Yep.
And I believe Ted Turner is the one who got them into the TBS program, right?
Yep. Yep.
So
And that move is one of the, not to be hyperbolic, that's one of the greatest sports coups or whatever you want to call it moves to boost a franchise from kind of being not really relevant to incredibly relevant. And that's why Braves fans are all over the country. That's why they call it Braves country. They're everywhere we go, you run into
Yeah,
people that have two generations of Braves fans, and it's all because of those TBS days.
exactly. And, you know, especially when they come here in Miami. I think we were here last September and you and I kind of got together,
Yep.
which I really appreciate you coming, taking the time and coming out and saying hi to me and stuff. So it was, you could tell like the stadium was filled with Braves fans.
Yep. And it's like that when the Braves are in Denver. It's really crazy to see just kind of the impact that has had all these years later and how big this fan base is. And now, you got to give the current regime credit because you got to keep it going, right? If the Braves were losing 100 games a year, the fan base wouldn't be as rabid as it is. But since the team continues to have success and the front office is so darn solid, it's just like a well-oiled machine.
It is. It is. Let me see if I can get this picture up here.
Oh yeah, there we
There we
go.
go. That's the family. What
Yep.
game was this, Brandon?
Okay, so that I said that I got that jersey after the 95 World Series, but now I'm remembering I got it the 94 strike year in December, and it was
Okay.
next year that the Braves won the World Series. And this is before game one, 95, Braves versus Cleveland. And game one was Greg Maddux against Oral Hershiser, and the Fred McGriff hit a homer, and the Braves
Oh
won
my
3-1.
God.
And
Yeah, that was
yeah, so that's
epic
my dad
moment.
on the left, my mom on the right, my uncle, my aunt, and then my two brothers in the back, and my cousin down in the front. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
So, kind of like, let's kind of get into this topic. My parents were always encouraging and never gave me any limitations growing up. Um, how big? How big? What big part of their family, or like, how big of a part were they, and getting you to where you are now?
See, that's a great question that I don't get a chance to talk about a lot. My parents were everything. I feel so spoiled growing up in a family with two parents who loved you, believed in you, pushed you, and also three siblings that loved me, believed me, and supported me. And they've
Right?
done that throughout my entire career. We're lucky to have a close knit group, and I talk to my family pretty much every day still, even though they don't live in Atlanta. We're kind of scattered around the U.S. But yeah, they were a real blessing. There's my three siblings there: Tamara, Brian, and Brett. And I was the last one to come along, so they put up with me, they tolerated me, and they continue to push me and want to make me better. And yeah, I mean, I'll get emotional talking about my family real quick, so maybe we don't do too deep of a dive, but they mean everything to me.
No, that's awesome, Brandon.
Yeah.
Um, there's what kind of led you to write the letter to Skip Caray? And I know you talked about it on TV several times how he was a big inspiration to you and wanting to be a broadcaster someday.
Yeah, Skip. So growing up watching those games, I knew from watching Skip that I wanted to. So these are the guys. This is my childhood right here. That's Skip Caray on the right, of course, son of Harry Caray, father to Chip Caray, who used to have the Braves job, now is in St. Louis. And I just wanted to be Skip because I watched every Braves game. I wrote him the letter C's because he was larger than life to me. And I wanted a chance to possibly get some advice from him because I knew that I wanted to try to be him someday. And I don't remember if it was my dad, my mom, but somebody said, hey, obviously it's before email. You can't reach out to anybody on social media. Why don't you write him a letter? So I got the address for Turner Broadcasting in Atlanta, and I wrote him a letter. And I thought, well, maybe there's a small percent chance he'll write back, but I really didn't think, I didn't even know if the letter would even get to him. I used to check the mail every day, and a couple months later, sure enough, there was a letter in the mail that said from Turner Broadcasting, and I couldn't believe it. I remember running in, holding that letter, and there wasn't any. There's the letter. Yeah, there wasn't
That's
anything.
the back of it. Yeah.
Yep, yep. There wasn't anything magical that he wrote in that letter. This is what I wrote to him. But I remember just receiving that letter made him real to me. It's like I said it a moment ago. It was almost as if he was this guy on my television that wasn't real, But when he wrote back and responded to this letter, by the way, I misspelled his name, which I'm still embarrassed about. It's Caray, and I can't, I have no
Don't
idea.
worry. I
I know
botcher
I was
names all the time, and I need to work on that. So don't feel it that bad.
but I am such a stickler for grammar and even though I was 13, it still haunts me that I misspelled his name. But anyways, that made him real to me and almost kind of pushed me harder into wanting to do what he did. I was like, oh, okay, this guy's real, and he took
Right?
the time to write me. And I still have that letter. It's just in the other room here at my place in Atlanta. So yeah, that was a really you don't want to blow it too out of proportion because I was 13, but that was a pretty big moment into telling me, okay, keep doing this. You're on the right
Right.
path. Keep pushing in that direction.
No, and I think that's a great point. Me growing up loving sports and not being able to play, just falling in love with these sports athletes. I ended up being a big Deion Sanders fan. He was one of my favorites. Watching Tom Glavine, John Smoltz, Greg Maddux, those were my favorite players. And, I ended up writing a letter one day to Troy Aikman and a few other players. I'm not going to say who, but he was the only one to send me back a whole bunch of autograph stuff, send me a letter. And to me, that really stuck to me for a long time. And which is why I kind of stayed true to being a Cowboy fan my whole life. I'm like, you know what? He went out of his way to actually send me something back, and that actually meant a lot to me. So, when he wrote you back, how did that feel?
Oh my gosh, it felt like the biggest, even though it was for broadcasting, it felt like the biggest sports moment in my life at that time. And it just, I remember holding that letter thinking, wow, this is the guy that I would love to do what he does someday. I watch him on TV every night, and he took the time to write me back and send me this letter. And yeah, you talk about that though, and about not being able to play as a kid. And I played as a kid, but I quickly realized I wasn't going to be doing it at the professional level. And so for you and me and people like us, what does that mean? Well, it means that we turn to these people. We want to live vicariously through these athletes and so they become these figures that are role models for us.
Yeah,
And for you writing letters to Troy Aikman, I wrote one to Terry Pendleton. I remember Terry Pendleton, who was the Braves third baseman back then, signed a
one of
card.
my favorite.
Yeah, he was a NL MVP back in the day. He signed a card and wrote it back to me and things like that. It's just as a kid when you want to be those athletes, it gives you these memories that you never forget and this desire to continue to want to be fans and support them, and all of those things just continue to fuel my love for baseball, but also specifically for the Braves.
So, as a kid growing up, besides Skip Caray, who else did you idolize?
I watched Harry Carey a lot because I would watch the Cubs on WGN when I would get home. Because back then Wrigley didn't have lights, so they would play the afternoon games at Wrigley, and then the
Most of the
Braves would
games
come
were
on.
afternoon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you would get kind of that. I think it was a 1:20 start. So I would come home from school and I would watch the middle to the end of the Cubs game with he and Steve Stone, and then at night I would watch the Braves. But I never cheered for the Cubs. I did find Harry Carey amusing because, like Skip, he was funny, and Harry, older in his career, would mispronounce half the names. There was one name, infielder Mark Grudzielanek, and he just could never come close to saying it. And but I really took to him and kind of listening to the humor that he would incorporate in the broadcast. And that's one thing that I appreciated about Skip too is Skip documented the game. He knew a lot. But he knew how to have the right amount of fun. And I always say for people coming home after a long day at work, maybe they just put the kids down, they sit on the couch, they take a deep breath, and they turn on the game. They kind of want to disconnect from what's been a hard
Right.
day for them. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean you're not, so if you're not having fun in the booth, they're probably not having fun watching you at home. And so I always try to keep that in mind that it's a real privilege to be able to do this job, and I think it's our job to bring energy and fun to the broadcast.
And that's what I love about you. You're always humorous, and there's a few key moments when you were a Braves broadcaster, that you just do a tremendous job. You make the game fun, throw in jokes here and there. Especially with Jeff Francoeur beside you. I think you guys were a great tandem, and we really appreciate you bringing that experience from home and listening to the game and making it fun for us. So let's kind of go into your college career. You ended up going to Butler. How
Mhm.
was that experience for you?
It was great. Yeah. So Butler, small school in Indianapolis, that most people know from when their basketball team became good and went to the Final Four in 2010 and 2011. But Butler had a great broadcast school, a good journalism school. And in Indiana, most people go to either Indiana or Purdue. And all my siblings were split between those schools. My cousins were split between those schools. But I did have a cousin that went to Butler. And something about being in the city of Indianapolis and also going to a smaller school where I felt like I would have more hands-on experience early was important for me,
Right.
because ultimately with broadcasting, does your GPA matter in getting a degree? Absolutely it does. But first and foremost, when you get out, people that are going to be hiring you, they want to hear your work. And so you need real world reps. And so I thought Butler, I said, okay, this is a smaller school where I might have a chance to get on air quicker, have more close access to professors and people in advisory roles. And it was great. It worked out great. Butler was a wonderful 4 year experience and kind of helped get me into minor league baseball after I graduated.
Nice. That's awesome. And kind of after your college career, you ended up going to Utah and New York, right? Where I do believe you ended up working with the producer for Larry King. Is that correct?
Yeah, good. In New York. Yeah. So I started in minor league baseball in Utah and doing what most guys do, right? I was making $500 a month. I was living on Clubhouse peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I had a great experience out there. And then there's a series of circumstances and a health issue with my dad that ultimately led me to later moving to New York the next year. And yes, Bobby Grossman, still a dear friend of mine who worked on Larry King Live, and a gentleman named Eric Sorensen, who used to be the president of MSNBC, and is still a dear friend of mine. They were helping start Stephen A. Smith's Quite Frankly show on ESPN.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was in New
Okay.
York. Yeah, it was in New York City. And those guys, they had gotten me as an intern in college. And then fast forward a few years later, when I was out of college, like we're talking about, they were starting a small media management company and asked me to come be a part of it. And I thought, well, a chance to be on the ground floor with two experienced people in the business at a New York City startup. I'm going to go and do this. And so I did it, and it taught me a lot. I grew up a lot in New York. That New York is unlike any place else. I learned a lot, and was there off air for about a year and a half before transitioning back to an on air role where I've been ever since.
That's awesome. Did you ever get a chance to meet Larry King? Although he's not a broadcaster, but he was known to be. Everybody knew who Larry King was, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the answer is no. Bobby Grossman, who was his producer, I've heard a zillion stories about Larry King and how amazing he is on and off camera. But yeah, that show was just iconic. And again, like you and I were talking about earlier, that was at a time where that was almost appointment television. You don't have a lot of those shows anymore that everybody watches. But Larry King on CNN was a show that everybody watched. He was such a gifted interviewer. And yeah, unfortunately, never met him, but loved watching that show growing up.
Awesome. So let's kind of get into Madden. For those of you that don't know, or for those of you that do play Madden, and kind of like are like, wait a minute, his voice sounds familiar. Well, that is because Brandon, you got an opportunity to be the voice of the Madden game, the video game that everybody loves to play. How did
Yeah,
that all come about, and how does it feel to be kind of known or to be actually talked about with Pat Summerall, John Madden himself, and all the other announcers that were on the game?
It's crazy. Something that I never thought would come my way, but it did, and in the strangest of circumstances. So after I left New York, I called games at the University of Evansville in my hometown, then at my alma mater, Butler, and then I came down to call games for Georgia Tech in Atlanta. That's what brought me to Atlanta in 2013. So I was in my third year at Georgia Tech. It's 2015, so about a decade ago, and I'm sitting in my office at Georgia Tech, and I get an email, and it's from LinkedIn, and it says, you have a message from the director of talent at EA Sports. Certainly, I was familiar with EA Sports. I grew up playing Madden and all the EA Sports video games. But the message was very cryptic. It just said who this woman was and said she wanted to talk to me about an opportunity. So to be honest, I kind of thought it was a joke or they said it to the wrong person. But I did
It's like, is
reply.
this real?
Yeah, yeah. I was like, am I being punked? Do you remember that old show with Ashton
Oh
Kutcher?
man.
Um, but I replied and she said, let's get on the phone. So we did. And she explained to me that they were getting ready to move on from Jim Nantz and Phil Simms, and they were doing a search for a new commentary team. And long story short, one of the producers on the game had heard one of my calls, I think on Sports Center, that happened to air there. And then he listened to some of my work online, and he just thought I had a voice and a style that would work very well for their video game. And so they brought me down to Orlando where they make that game back in 2015 to interview. And I remember going in and doing the audition. And basically, it's like you're going in to be an actor. You're reading lines. It's not normal play-by-play. You're reading a
Yeah.
script. But I remember it felt very natural, and I thought it went well. But I also knew that they were bringing in guys with much bigger names, that had bigger resumes, that had national TV experience. And at the time, I didn't have any of that. But lo and behold, a couple months later, they called and asked me if I would. They said that we liked you the best. Would you want to sign up to do this? And yeah, a couple weeks later, signed on the dotted line. And hard to believe that myself and the analyst Charles Davis, who's on the number 2 crew with Ian Eagle at CBS, that we've been doing it now. This is our 9th year, which is crazy to think about. But it's been something I thought that I would never
Wow.
get to do. And it's totally different from sitting in a booth and calling actual live play-by-play. But it has been such a thrill, and I'm so grateful for it.
How is it working with Charles Davis? He seems like such a great guy.
He's the best.
You know,
Yeah.
he's a well-known commentator, broadcaster, and I think he was a player, right?
Yeah, he was a player. He was a great player at Tennessee, not in the NFL, but then that's one thing that makes him so unique is Charles, even though he was a great college player, to be able to call games that high in the NFL without a big NFL playing resume, it just speaks to how great he is at what he does and how smart he is with football. He knows everything about football. He's a savant. And not only that, he's just a genius. He's just one of those guys that has a high IQ, reads all the time. Nobody is more prepared during a broadcast than Charles Davis. He studies his craft incredibly well, and he has been a tremendous, tremendous friend and mentor and outlet for me over these last 9 years. I don't even want to think about my life anymore without Charles. That's how big of a role that he has played, and I still talk to him regularly and get to do the video game with him and his wife and his kids. It's like a second family to me. And I don't know if I want to call him. I don't want to call him a second father because the age gap isn't as big. But I'll just call him a bigger brother, another big brother that has been such a
There
tremendous
we go.
resource and friend. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it there, Brandon. So growing up, besides baseball or just now in general, what was your favorite sport to cover? Or what was your favorite sport or game that you covered in the past year? Or the
Well,
most memorable
baseball.
one that you can remember?
Yeah, well, just in general, baseball and basketball, those two sports growing up, being around them so much, it just kind of always felt like riding a bike to me. And there was something so comfortable about baseball because that is what I grew up watching every single night of my childhood. And that's not an exaggeration. I used to watch it every single night. And I played basketball all the time growing up in Indiana. So those were just, and then when I got into high school, I started playing football. So those sports just kind of, just like most kids, you grow up with them, you watch them, you play them, and you start to get a grasp for them. And so when I started broadcasting them, those sports just it just felt again like riding a bike. But there was something specifically comfortable in my high school days when I started broadcasting high school baseball about putting that headset on and talking about baseball, just from my connection with the Braves and TBS. Now, you ask about specific broadcasts. There are so many games that I've been fortunate enough to call, and all three that really stick out. My first NFL game for Fox, which was back in 2018, which was the Ravens and Phoenix. It was, or Arizona, Phoenix. Arizona, Kyler Murray against Lamar Jackson was the first game that I did, and it was in Baltimore.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was
Okay.
it was a tremendous game. But I just remember, because that was my
Two of the
first
most
NFL
athletic
telecast.
quarterbacks in the game today, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was an unbelievable game. It was kind of glimpse into the future of those two quarterbacks, and there was a little bit extra with that first NFL opportunity that will always stick with me. And then for the Braves, that first job, or that first game after getting the job 2 years ago, the home opener, the Braves walked it off. Orlando Arcia had an RBI hit to win it, and the opportunity to sit in that chair, first game at home, and the job that I had dreamt about as a kid, the Braves walk it off, and I got to call the game winner. And then I just got to sit there, see silent for about 20 seconds and just listen to the crowd go
Oh,
nuts.
man.
And I get goosebumps thinking about it, because that specific moment, we opened on the road, and that was cool. But the home opener, and sitting in that chair that Skip sat in, and then Chip sat in, and that I had the chance to sit there and be behind that microphone. It was almost like a dream come true, whatever you want to call it. Use whatever cliche you want, but that was really, really special.
That's great. That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that for
Mhm.
us. Yeah, and I remember vaguely that game too. And I think you were like, and the Braves win. Or see you later. I love every time you say that. That's like one of my favorite lines. um, kind of I want to get into players always have rituals or superstitions. Is there any ritual that you do before a game broadcasting?
Not really. I kind of, like most people that do what I do, I have a routine that just sort of happens based on how the game, pregame and game goes. So, you know, the batting practice times, home and road, are always a staple. It's always at the same time. And so you kind of get there, you go up to the booth, you set your stuff down, you go down to the field, you partake in batting practice, not hitting, obviously. No one would want to see that. But being around the cage and talking to players and coaches, when you cover a team every day and you have to do a broadcast every night, that's where you get a lot of your new, fresh information, is talking to those players and coaches. That time around the cage is really invaluable. And you really get a lot of good time on the road, because at home, the players have more distractions. There's more fans that want to talk to them, take pictures. But on the road and in the clubhouse, you're kind of just, you're on an island with those guys, so to speak, in enemy territory. And so you get a lot of one-on-one time. And not only just, first of all, yes, you get information, but also just developing relationships. Forget about stuff you're going to use on air. You learn about their kids, their wives, their
Right.
families, what they did the night before. And developing those relationships in this role, I think, is so important. And it also is big just to build up trust with them, so that they know that they can tell you something. And if they say, hey, that's not for on air, I'm not going to use it on air. I'm never going to put something on air that they don't want out there. And that's part of this role too, is earning that trust. But, I say that because that batting practice time is really the biggest. You asked about routines. That's really the biggest part of the day for me that I want to make sure that I take a part in. And then you go back up, you get something to eat, you put in the lineup cards, update all your final notes. Since baseball, it's just, there's so many numbers. The game is so numbers driven. I want to make sure that I've got everything right and get everything in the right order. And I use a mix of a scorebook, an old fashioned scorebook, and then on my laptop, which I'm on now talking to you, I use the program Microsoft OneNote to organize all of my player notes, not only for the
Okay.
Braves, but
Cool.
every team. And so I have a process where I go through and make sure that all of that, all my storylines are set, everything's where I want it to be. And then all of a sudden you look up and it's 7 o'clock and you're going on air in 5 minutes and here we go again. And the next day it's like Groundhog's Day. You just kind of rinse and repeat and do it all over again.
That's great. That's awesome. And you know, that's good that you kind of gave us an insight on that. Because I did watch one of your videos, and you did say that on the road games you like to run 3 miles, do 100 push-ups, and 50 chin-ups. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm trying to mix it up. People make fun of me for how, yeah, that's a good call, how routine oriented I am. I'm trying to mix it up because people make fun of me for kind of doing that same thing every day. So I do that. I have run 3 miles every day for, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, over 15 years. Now, some days I do skip occasionally, but most days I do it. And then I do have a push up and pull up routine that I do. I know you can tell because I'm so buff in this extra medium top that I'm wearing here. Um,
I was gonna
but
say,
but
man, I might need to get some of that workout plan there.
it's a joke. I'm scrawny. But the whole routine is something that I found that with how much I sit in this job, I do like to just get a little movement. It helps me get out, get a little fresh air. If I'm in the gym, at least move around a little bit. And so, yeah, that's my daily routine, whether I'm at home or on the road. I do like to get a little bit of movement and cardio in, just again because every night when you sit down, you're there in that booth and you're just watching the game for those few hours. So yeah, a lot of people make fun of me for that, though, C's. So there you go.
I love it, man. No, it's definitely something that we have to keep doing, just to keep active, get our bodies moving and stuff. So
Yeah.
I definitely like that for sure. So I always say sports is not always about winning and losing. It's more about relationships that you create on and off the field, court, or whatnot, and the relationships you build with your teammates, coaches, players, and just the people around you, and as fans. It's a time where you can kind of like stress relief. It's like a stress reliever. Get away from everything that's happened before, what's or if anything that you're thinking about in the future. So, how has is sports impacted you in a positive way? And what kind of advice would you give somebody, or a young fan, or somebody that wants to be a broadcaster?
Yeah, well, sports from when I was a kid has just impacted me in such a positive way. I mean, it just, you talked about relationships. Sports teaches you so much. As a kid, it teaches you teamwork, it teaches you how to deal with others. I say all the time, youth coaches are invaluable. Like especially, I was blessed. I told you my dad was my high school soccer coach, and he's just such a tremendous man and was such a tremendous coach. But beyond that, the other coaches I had, just thinking about how they taught you about how to interact with other kids, what to do, what not to do, how to treat people. You can learn a lot of that through sports, and just how to be more selfless and realizing that it's not just about you. There are other people that make this thing go. And I think that's a microcosm that can spread to how life on earth is. Not to be a little too big about it, but I think that there's a reality in that. And so sports just has had such an impact on me from when I was a kid, obviously, to still now. Even though it's a different role, I still learn so much from being around these games and the relationships that you develop with different people and having to deal with people from different backgrounds and hearing their stories and wanting to tell their stories. There's something to me that's so special and powerful about that. In regards to, what I would say to somebody that wants to get into this, I would say that, I always say get into it because you love the art of broadcasting. If you chase a specific job or wanting to be in front of the camera or the glitz and the glamour and the side of the job that you see publicly, while sure there's some great things to that, I think ultimately if you chase it for that, you will find disappointment. If you do it for, wow, I love this, I love the art of preparation, I love the game, I love storytelling, I love being at the park, I love being in the arena, I love being at the football stadium. If that is more of your motivation, then you're more likely to have success. If you ultimately deep down, and only you know this, you can tell everybody whatever you want, but only
Yeah.
you know your real motivation. If deep down your motivation is, gosh, I'd love to be on ESPN someday and be able to make a good living and go out and have people recognize me and want to hear my voice. If that's the motivation, I just think that if you put your hope in those things, ultimately it will fail you long term. And so, yeah, I always try to say that to make sure that kids that are getting into it aren't just doing it kind of for the lights, camera, and the action, but because it's something that they truly have a passion for. And it's something that, thankfully for me, I've just always had a passion for since I was a kid. And I love preparing. I love getting up and reading different stories from the beat writers and thinking about, okay, how can I tell Ozzie Albies' story differently today? How can I say something about Austin Riley that hasn't been said before? I think there's a beauty in that. There's a challenge in it, and it's something that I've always enjoyed.
That's great. And, I piggyback off that. I totally agree. Growing up and just having sports in my life has been such a great impact. And kind of briefly to tell you, in high school, I wasn't able to play any of the sports in high school, but I got such a great opportunity. One of my teachers and great friend now, Heimel, ended up getting me in touch with one of the football coaches. And from then on, I ended up becoming the assistant coach of the football team. So I was able to get involved with the football program and being able to be part of the team and getting to know the ins and out of the game and just being able to be a coach and mentor young kids and, you know, especially your friends and stuff on the team meant so much to me. So I really appreciate you telling us that as well. And I think, sports can do so much for us, and then it's not just about the wins or losses, just the relationships we all create throughout our lifetime.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I just, seeing your passion for the Braves and just for sports in general, and, the little that I've gotten to know you and when we chatted there in Miami, kind of your fervor and passion for life is really cool. As somebody who did not have the ability to play, something that a lot of people I think would get down about and just maybe get really sour and angry at the world, but you seem to have turned that into a positive and have an impact on others through sports, even though you maybe were not able to play them. And man, I just think that that's so cool and so powerful.
Thank you, and that's why I wanted to start this platform. Just get to tell other people's stories,
Mhm.
their impact on what it has done for them in their life. And, I really appreciate you coming on and telling us your journey and passion for the sport. But before I let you go, I'm kind of going to put you on the spot here, if you don't
Uh-oh.
mind, Brandon. So, this past year, the Florida Panthers, and I'm a big hockey fan. I don't know how much of a hockey fan you are, but the Panthers won the Stanley Cup. And winning the Stanley Cup and being able to go to game 7, watch the team win was one of the best experiences of my life. So, during the celebration, maybe a week later, they ended up having a parade on the beach in Sunrise, Florida. And it was crazy. It just kept raining and raining, thunderstorms all day. So I'm gonna play a video of what ended up happening on the parade. Want to see if maybe you can do a little play-by-play while the video is playing?
Okay. Oh my
So this is a
gosh.
kind of a little brief story. So the buses ended up just stopping. I'm gonna give you a little breakdown real quick, and then we'll see what you got. But they ended up handing me a beer. I ended up celebrating, and the head coach of the Florida Panthers came out of the bus and gave me a hug, and then just unbelievable moment. So here, I'll play the video and let you see it.
Okay.
One open, ready for you. Throw it all over
Dude, that is awesome. I mean, you're going to get me emotional watching that. We talked about the impact that is the impact of sports right there. The bringing
And kind of
together.
like, I'm
Yeah.
kind of going, I'm kind of going to go back a little bit too, Brandon, because I don't know if you know, but a year before that, the Panthers were in the Stanley Cup as well against Vegas, and they lost in, I believe it was Game 6. But I was in the hospital, and I ended up being in cardiac arrest during that playoff run, and I wasn't able to experience the whole playoff run. And just for them to come back and me being able to get back on my chair and being able to go to the games again and celebrate it with my friends, all the emotion of like winning was just like no other. I can't explain it.
Yeah, I cannot imagine, but just watching that video, knowing a little bit about what you've gone through to be able to celebrate with the team, and then having the fans right there and your friends chant your name, man, that was really cool, and I appreciate you sharing that. I didn't know, I knew you lived down there. I didn't know you were a big hockey fan, big Panthers fan, but that must have been an unbelievable memory, and now you've got that video for a lifetime, man, and that's really really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
good
and
for you.
it was a special moment, and for the coach to just come out of the bus, and he didn't have to do that, and just being able to celebrate with it, just that hug, like knowing that wow, we're Stanley Cup champions, and he said it too after we won the Stanley Cup, is we didn't win the Stanley Cup, we actually we're sharing the Stanley Cup as a
Mm,
community, as a team, as an organization, as everybody together. We're sharing this moment. So
yeah,
I
that's
really
cool.
appreciated that.
Yeah, but it also says a lot about you, man. People like you and appreciate you and gravitate to you, and there's a reason that they came over and wanted to celebrate that moment with you, and that's pretty special.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Brandon. I really appreciate you coming on. Any last words? Anything you want to say to anybody that watching this?
No, I appreciate you having me. The only thing I'll say is I better see you at a Braves game this year in Miami, and hopefully somewhere else on the road as well. Sees.
Yeah, I did go to Truist Park, and one of the best stadiums I've ever been to. I was actually there 2019, and just the atmosphere, it was so unbelievable. Just they did such a great job with that stadium, and just having the restaurants, and they have so many activities for the kids. It's a really family oriented stadium, and I was really impressed with seeing that stadium. And I think it was Brian McCann's last season, so I was able to see him play growing up, watching him, Freddie Freeman, Jeff Francoeur, those guys. So I was really happy. And that's actually the year my dad passed away. So my brother lives in Alabama. So we ended up visiting my brother, and we took a drive over there. But definitely would love to go and catch a game and meet up with you sometime as well. And definitely let me know when you guys. When you're in town, and maybe we can meet up as well. So I
Yeah,
just want
and
to
when
thank you for everything you've done.
yeah,
And, thank you for being so awesome and genuine to the fans. and we wish you nothing but the best and a great journey on your adventure as well.
Thanks, Caesar. We're getting you in the booth when you come up to Truist this year. And thanks for you and all that you do. And just what a kind of shining star you are for those around you, man. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us on today's episode. I want to really thank Brandon Gaudin for coming on and telling us his life story. So we really appreciate that. And I hope somebody gets inspired on his story, not only his story, but all the stories that we have on here. We really appreciate it. Um, we can't thank you guys enough. Re- um, the show I started it about a month ago now. We're in episode 3, and the tremendous amount of support and people coming up to me saying, "Great job." It's really encouraging, and it because of you guys is what gets me motivated to keep doing this. And I hope somebody out there does get encouraged to continue your dreams, continue to um, work hard to accomplish those dreams. And nothing's impossible. Anybody can do it. It's just about the want to. And don't ever let anybody put you down. Always fight, always continue the journey, put your head down, and have fun. Most of all, have fun. I'm having a blast. I will continue to put great content on here, and I'm super excited and hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you till next time.